What is going on, people? Welcome to the On a Level podcast, episode 32. We're here with another producer today, Marvelous. How you doing, bro?
Hey, what's going on, bro? How are you?
I nailed it. Marvelous. That is how you pronounce it, right?
That's how you do it. Yeah, that's how you say it.
That's how we do it.
Yeah.
That's sick, man. And for those who don't know who you are, give a little introduction back to yourself.
All right, man. So, Sydney, Australia. Been doing this for a bit now. Probably, I'd say about close to 10 years, but like in the background of things. Full-time real estate agent. So like live life as a normal individual.
Oh shit.
Yeah. I work in a family business and stuff. So it's like normal, usual individual type stuff. But then like always had a hobby for music. Always had a love for music, man. It's been a hobby forever. So yeah.
Okay.
And the last couple of years, I'd say probably just been really like getting deep into Aus rap. And just really like discovering who's who and just we can get into that anyway, but you know.
Yeah. No, we're definitely getting into this now. So you've been doing this for about 10 years, you reckon?
I'd say 10 years, man. I've been fiddling around with like music production for at least 10 years.
And what how did that begin? What started year one? How did it all begin?
I'd say year one. Well, okay. So to begin with, it probably started with loving music altogether, just generally loving music. Yeah. But then got into DJing at an early stage. DJing was fun. It was good at the time. Playing at a few clubs and whatever, earning a bit of money. But it started to lose its appeal because it was becoming a little bit too repetitive. So I wanted to understand a little bit more about the technical side of things, the production side of things. And that's when I got myself. I've got a cracked version of Fruity Loops. That's generally how everybody starts, right? Like it sounds like a cliche, you know?
No one could afford it. You get a cracked version of the software. You can't save your projects properly. There's one feature that don't work, but you roll with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then from there on, man, it just became like this thing where I was at the time I was working and I was like couldn't wait to get home to get into Fruity Loops and just like get stuck into it. You know what I mean? So it just became this love. And then just from then on, man, just like every day, just like smashing it out. And then eventually just to this point right now, I mean, it's something that like I think I'll probably do forever as a hobby, even in my later years, whether it's something if it's on a commercial level or even it's just for fun, you know? So
it's something that you've been doing in your spare time anyway. It's something that you've always had a passion in anyway. So regardless of the money or the work opportunities, you're going to be messing about with it anyway.
100%.
And I think that's the most important. And again, it sounds like the cliche story, but it's the story that ends up being true for a lot of people. Just, I love it, so I'm going to do it anyway.
Absolutely, man.
And I mean, if you've been doing it 10 years, I think that's a testament to it, because some people say, oh, yeah, and I love this. And then 6 months later, they're like, yeah, but I don't have time. No, if you truly love something, you'll find the time for it.
100%. Couldn't agree more. It was just, like I said, one of those things, man. Like, it's just like when you when you really found a passion or when you really found something that you enjoy, you just want to spend all your time on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's you can't wait to get 100%. To do that thing. So. That's how I knew, or that's how I know I love it.
No, that's sick, man. So when you started, what kind of style of music was you creating?
At that time, when I was DJing still, I was making just like house, like real, like just the stuff that you guys actually play in the clubs over there. That real funk, like I can't even remember the artists at the time were like, I think it was like Eric Prydz at the time, like that sort of stuff, like that real tech progressive house or whatever it was,
Yeah.
Like all that sort of stuff. And then, and then eventually just my cousin actually was making like rap beats. And then I was like, oh, like these are sick, like I could definitely get into this. So we eventually got into it like together, and we just started knocking out heaps. I mean, at the start they were crappy as hell.
Of course, as anything is when you first start.
Yeah.
It's a rare occasion for somebody to make their first beat or first anything in the creative field and it just be the hit or smashing it out. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that's
so you started doing that with your cousin, and then it just progressed from there.
Absolutely, man. And then it got to a point. I don't know if you've. I have to give him a plug because he's the guy that put me onto it. I don't know if you've ever seen the name floating around Malik One Lane, or the studio One Lane Studios.
One Lane Studios. Not off the top of my head. Maybe I've seen some work from them, but
yeah,
not
like he's the
off the top of my
a
head.
lot of the stuff, or I'd say, you know, there's a portion of stuff that you've seen online or at least come across once or twice. Rops is actually shot in the studio there.
Right.
Some of the clips, and I think you even mentioned it on one of the ones where I think it was T-Rex and Rops. They shot 2 videos in the same night. I think it was. I think you even pointed it out. I think it was. So that particular studio, the guy that runs that studio, the guy that owns that studio, Malik, he's the guy that really got me into the Aus rap scene.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had to plug him, man, because if it wasn't for him, really, I mean, I wouldn't have any ties into anything. You know, I wouldn't have met Rops. I wouldn't have had any ties into this. So I have to plug him.
Yeah, that's sick, man. I was just about to ask that then. I was about to say, was that your connecting point for how you know Rops or how you've worked with Rops before then?
Yeah, 100%. So it was really weird that night. I just rocked up to the studio and we were just hanging out, you know, just talking, whatever. And then he said, "Oh, have you heard of Rops?" I said, "Yeah, I've heard of Rops. I haven't heard too much, but I've heard like one or two things, you know." Yeah. And he said, "Oh, he's coming through tonight." I said, "Oh, I'm mad." And then like I think I was doing a session with another artist, another sick artist, Dre Cliche. Actually, he's a really good artist. You'll see him eventually.
Heard of him? Yeah.
But then after, like, we finished our session, and then sort of me and Rops got to talking and played a couple of beats, and then from there on, he's just like he started rapping, and then it just like the formula and the chemistry really worked from there, and then it was just from there on, it just kept going.
So literally he just heard what you were producing. Was you making like fresh beats there and there for him, or did you kind of show him what you already had?
Yeah, like so I was playing stuff for Dre, and then I think he was there anyway. He could hear it, and then our session finished, and I started to play a few things, and I think Frontline was one of them, and then that's the one he ended up recording over, and that's what Frontline turned into. So it was just a beat that I played.
Oh, that's sick, man.
Yeah.
So did Rops come to the studio kind of knowing what you wanted to do, or was he just rocking up to just make music?
Yeah, I think he was just rocking up. I don't even think he had the intention of making music. I think he was just turning up.
So and then a business partnership just sparked from there.
Basically, yeah.
Oh, that's sick.
That's how it unfolded.
And so you ended up producing how many tracks on his album?
I did the whole thing.
The whole thing?
The whole thing, yeah.
What? I thought you only did a few tracks. You did the whole thing?
I did the whole thing, yeah. I did the whole thing. Thanks, bro.
That's a round of applause moment there. That is a round of applause moment. Okay, so when people look at Rops and they're like, this is the style that Rops brings, you are a massive driving force behind that then. You are the engine that kind of like, right, you are the framework for what he is able to lay out for us then.
I mean, it can be interpreted in so many different ways. I mean, it goes hand in hand. Like he's a fucking dope artist. You know what I mean? Like if it wasn't for his, I guess, you know, for him being who he is, you know, it wouldn't have complemented the beats for what they were. You know what I mean? So it goes hand in hand. But definitely, I can see what you're saying there. Definitely, for sure.
Yeah. Ah, that's sick, man. So you produced the whole album. I'm assuming you mixed and mastered it all. Like you did all the engineering side of it as well.
Yeah, did all of that. I mean, obviously, like it was crazy because it's like we had finished like the last track, like say 3 weeks before we actually decided to release it. So one night we were in the studio one night, and Dills, his manager, he's like, I think we have to drop this album on the 6th of the 4th, which is Rops' postcode, 6-4. Like, that's why it's Rops' 6-4. Yeah. And he's like, we have to drop this album on the 6th and the 4th. It was like 3 weeks out. I'm like, bro, how are we going to mix and master this thing in 3 weeks? You know, he's like, we just got to get it done. So it's like, everybody put their head down. We got it done, man. So
and smashed it out.
We got there in the end, yeah.
That's it. So that's just an impromptu, like, you know what? This makes sense of when to drop it. And you are kind of looking at that deadline thinking, yeah, sure, we'll give it a go.
Yeah, totally.
Was there any cut content because of that? Was there anything that wasn't like polished enough, or was it kind of, you know what? I think we've set our mind on getting this amount done, and then that's what you managed to put out.
I think there were about 3 or 4 tracks that didn't make it. I think maybe like those 3 or 4 probably weren't finished the way we wanted them to be finished. you know, you'd understand being an artist, so you know how it is. So,
Of course.
yeah. And then
Of course. Oh, of course. I think it's the worst thing when an artist or an act rushes content to put it out on time. You always notice the difference, whether it be films or games. Like, there's plenty of industries in the world where whenever you rush a product, normally you can end up seeing that in the finished result itself.
100%.
So I always agree, just either take more time to work on it or cut it if it's not good enough.
100%.
Or not ready yet even, and maybe you can use that later on or down the road. But yeah.
That was definitely the case, man. Like those 3 or 4 songs, I mean, they were great ideas, and like the content was awesome, but it just like they weren't done the way, you know, he wanted them to be done. Or
no, of course.
So, you know, they unfortunately they didn't make the album, but the 15 that were on there were songs that we were definitely like, yeah, these have to be on there. So, and 4 of them, you know, you did the reviews on them anyway, so 4 of them had already been heard, but there were 11 more that nobody had heard, and that's what we were like so like excited to give 11 songs to people, you know, 11 new songs.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good balance as well in terms of singles to what you then put out on the album release. Like, I know, obviously, you heard of the American artist Joyner Lucas.
Yep.
Yeah, so obviously Joyner put out his album ADHD, which I was massively excited for as well, and the release date kept getting pushed back, and then by the time we got the finished product, there was like 20 songs or whatever, which like a good quarter of them are skits as well, and then you already heard like 9 of the tracks, and then there's only like 4 or 5 new ones, and it was like you heard more than what you was given new, and it just didn't feel right. Whereas other artists just kind of sometimes do a surprise album, boom, here's 20 new tracks that you've never heard before, and then sometimes that's a bit too overwhelming, and sometimes the best work gets overshadowed because of it, because there's so much attention having to be spread out. I think that's a really interesting conversation to have about different artists and how many songs they should put in an album. Like, certain artists, I don't think they're ready for an album. I think they should just work on an EP for now. There's other artists where it's like, I'm dying to hear more from you because I believe that you definitely can bring us that. You know, and sometimes it's not necessarily down to talent. Sometimes it's just about an artist's life story or what's going on in their life. It's like, how much do we feel like we need to hear from you as an audience? You know, and I talked about that in the Rops review, saying about, and correct me if I'm wrong, just off the top of my head.
Sure.
I managed to say that there was 4 or 5 that I felt that didn't need to necessarily be there, and 10 tracks would have been my personal opinion would have been 10 tracks would have been perfect. But it's interesting because did you, when working with Rops, did he have an idea of this is how many tracks I want to have, or was he kind of just making content and then just whatever works is what ended up being put out?
Yeah, it was definitely on the fly. I mean, we were just making tracks, and you know, every song that he would come into the studio and say, look, I've got this that I really want to put on the album. He had it written before he came in, so you know, we'd be you know, siphoning through beats and looking at beats and what would fit and what wouldn't, and maybe make a new one or whatever it is. And he was like, this has to go on the album. And there were a few of those that had to go on the album. So he already knew that. I don't think he had a particular number of how many would be on the album, but he knew what songs would be on there. It just happened to be 15. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, and that's just how it works out. But he had his 4, 5, 6, however many it was, that he was just like, no, this definitely has to be there.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
That's sick. Talk to us about the cursor feature.
Cursor feature, man. I think that's been in like the works forever. You know, like everyone's been seeing them on socials together. You know, Curse always dropped into the studio. Like, Curse is probably like one of my favorite, not just artists, but one of my favorite individuals and human beings, because like for the status and caliber of who he is, he's like the most humble and genuine person. You know, and that's very hard to come across in this industry, man. Very, very hard.
And just to be clear, he's not so necessarily humble in his music, but as a person outside of the music, he's a humble person. Because in his music, he's very cocky, very chest out. I'm saying everything, and I mean
absolutely.
It. But as a person, when you talk to him, he's a very humble person.
Absolutely, man.
No,
like
100%, I agree with that.
You know, the fact that, you know, he's, you know, one of the biggest rappers in the country hasn't gone to his head. So he's definitely remained grounded, and he's just one of those people that you can, you know, when you're having a conversation with him, you can believe what he's saying and believe what he's telling you, you know. But back to the point, I think that the feature's been in the works for a while, man. Like, you know, they've been seen with each other on socials, they've been, you know, talking to each other on Instagram, you know, all that sort of stuff, and people have been hanging for it. So I think the album was the perfect time. It was the perfect timing, you know. I didn't necessarily know what song it would have been, but one day Rops did come to the studio and he said, look, this is the one that Curse is going to go on. So, we had to make sure that it was going to be hard.
No, definitely. And so, you knew that you wanted to have Cursor on. Did Rops kind of make the conscious decision of, I only want Cursor as a feature and nobody else? Like, what was the reasoning behind only having Cursor as a feature on the album?
To be honest with you, I don't know the real, like, deeper thoughts behind it, but I could probably say, I think Rops just, okay, so firstly, I think the idea of having Cursor as a feature, like, nobody can really get that. So, or nobody has really had that besides, Cursor's guys. The JUF and Rates, they're the only two guys that really have ever had a Cursor feature.
He keeps it within his own clip.
Absolutely
100%.
Absolutely. And for the fact that Rops had him on his first debut album, that's a big thing. And I think that in itself is a statement, and I think he wanted to keep it at that. Anything more than that, probably, I don't know, to be honest. I don't know what he was thinking, but I think it was a good move. To be honest, I think it was a good move, because that's one song that everybody would have been looking forward to. So and I think it did well. I think, a lot of people would have opened up that album, went straight to number 10 or whatever number it was, and just heard it straight away. So,
no, I was just about to mention that. I mean, just even having a name like that, and it being the only name, and there's something so special about having just one feature on an album, because it really highlights that feature. And even if you're a casual fan, or even if you're discovering this artist for the first time and you just look at that track list, say you go on Spotify and you click on their album and then you just notice there's one feature, I'm going to listen to one song from this artist, let's click on that one. It's just, and especially because Cursor is, arguably the biggest name in Australian hip-hop, if you wasn't a fan of Rops but you are a fan of Cursor, or whether you didn't know about Rops but know about Cursor for some reason, then people are going to be like, well, I want to hear Cursor anyway. And that's your introduction to Rops. And I've got to say that track worked really well. The chemistry between them two, and the way obviously you've tied that with the instrumental there. It just stylistically worked really well. But Cursor did stand out in his own way. The minute he spoke on that mic, you can hear the difference because you've heard 9-10 tracks of Rops. Then Cursor's voice touches it, and it's just new to your ears.
100%.
It works really well.
I definitely agree with you.
That's sick. So Rops did this album, he's put it out, and I know you're going to continue to work with each other in the future, or is it just kind of just chill for now, or is he like straight back on the music?
He's like, I mean, with all this crap going on at the moment, it's really hard to get in again, because everyone's just like tied down and very weary and like cautious about their movements and stuff. And it's like, can we really go into a place with more than 3 or 4 people? People might look at us and say, what's going on? But I think, we're talking all the time. We talk every day and all that sort of stuff, through Instagram, and we're talking about, what have you been writing? Or, I've got beats, I've been sending him beats, and just back and forth. And, every now and again he'll show me a verse and be like, oh, this is, is this good? What do you reckon? And so he's definitely got his mind on already starting album 2, which is a good thing, right? I mean, like, imagine dropping the second album in 1 year. That's something that nobody really does.
Are you looking to drop it by the end of the year?
I mean, he's definitely got it in his sights, for sure. Yeah.
That's mad.
Yeah, it's big, man. And it's, I mean, I don't know I don't know if he's decided if it's going to be another, solely just Rops, or if he's going to get some other features. But I think this second album, if it works in the way that he wants it to work, I think he'll definitely have some big names on there. So
yeah, I mean, you see that sometimes from artists where they put out an album that is, purely their creative viewpoint, and then they get their reception on that, and then they normally follow it up with less of an album and more of a mixtape where they get the features, and they go for that more commercial sound. They go for the sound that appeals to others more than themselves. Sometimes, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's oftentimes they end up being quite popular. UK rapper Giggs did it. He did his album Landlord that had a mixed reception, good positive reception, but mixed. And then he dropped his mixtape Warm to Them, and he had the features on nearly every track there. And my God, there were some, and they were the ones that were considered classics off of there. Some people do it, and this wouldn't be the case for Rops, but some people do it as kind of to bounce back as quick as possible. Eminem did it. He did that Revival album. we won't speak too much on that album. And then he followed it up with a Kamikaze. You know, there's plenty of artists that do that. And if Rops is doing it from the standpoint of, you know what, I've put out an album, it's been positively received for the most part, from what I understand anyway. Let's go follow it up with something else and just really just smash this year out and make 2020 his year.
It's really hard to determine how well it's done though, because usually when you drop an album, there's like a show that follows, and then so because we're locked down, we can't really do a show. But I'd imagine that if we had a show, like I genuinely believe that he'd be able to sell the show out. You know?
Easily. I reckon he would. And I mean, just clear something up for me real quick. Rops and Cursor, are they from the same area as Sydney?
They're so originally from Campbelltown. Like I don't know the exact where they live, but like from that way. So which is
okay. And so with obviously Cursor, putting on for Rops and people publicly knowing their relationship and now knowing that they've made music together and that they plan on doing that in the future even. Did that give a boost to Rops's kind of reputation, or did it boost kind of his expectation almost, where people are like, oh, Cursor's the one, like, and Cursor doesn't do it with many people, but Cursor's like, yeah, Rops is going to be the next big thing up. And so does that, I don't know, does that put pressure on Rops? Did it build the excitement for him? How much did that change for Rops? And obviously I know it's difficult for you to answer that on behalf of him, but from your perspective.
I mean, in my opinion, like from what I think, I mean, anybody who would have, Cursor back them in a sense, the people are going to listen to that. The people are going to see that and they're going to say, well, yeah, you're right. He's next, or he's the guy. And does that put any pressure on Rops? I'd say, I mean, Rops is definitely, he's able to handle any sort of pressure, but I mean, I'd say that there is some sort of expectation, but I mean, just listen to him. He's definitely, he can hold his own. His music speaks for itself. You know what I mean? And I think it's one thing that I really noticed when you were doing, I think it was the first review that you did of Frontline. And you mentioned that Rops is like that kind of artist where when he's delivering in like an aggressive yet relaxed way. And it just sounds like whatever he's saying is very compelling. So when you hear him speak, it's like he draws your attention. You're listening to him. You know what I mean? So in person, he's that kind of individual as well. So he can handle the pressure the pressure that's building. I think he can handle it, and the expectations that are there, I think he can meet them. So in a sense, I think he'll do well.
Yeah, that's it, man. I mean, being able to rap in almost a passive aggressive way.
It is. It is.
Being the loudest in the room doesn't necessarily always mean dominant, so it doesn't always necessarily mean you're the biggest,
That's right.
But being able to just that conviction in when he says something, that kind of, I listen to certain artists, whether that be UK, Australia, US, and there's certain artists that I just don't believe it when they're saying it. It may be true, what they're talking about, but I just don't believe. With Rops, he's one of those artists that can make me believe what he says, whether it's true or not. And I take him to be quite a genuine person, and all of the legal things he talks about to be true. But he's able to say things in a way that obviously connects with the audience, and it does make it a lot easier to enjoy his music when you believe what someone's saying, when you believe the story that they're telling. But
definitely.
Man, shout out to Rops, man. You and him did a fantastic job with that album.
Thanks, bro.
So who else have you worked with? Is there any other names that people would know about that you have worked with in the scene?
So we're like as I mentioned before, Malik, the guy that owns the One Lane brand, he's like, so before all of this, he's a mate anyway. Like he was a friend of my cousin, and I became close with him through my cousin anyway. So he's like the hub of this underground scene, and he's got his hand, not got his hand, but he's got connections to everybody and can sort of get everybody into the place and work together. So I've worked with like so many artists through him. A lot of them are probably a little bit too underground at the moment, but I'd be saying in the next year or so they'd be coming through and really making some noise.
Drop them names, man. Drop them names if you're happy to, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got he's got like under his sort of roster, he's got the Free Souls. Yep. He's got Pabs. I don't know if you've come across the name Pabs. I think he's one of your countrymen as well, but he's living in Sydney.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's really dope as well. Who else have we got? I mean, I'm definitely going to forget people, but there are so many there. Dre Cliche was one of them. Who else? There's quite a few. I'll probably remember them halfway through this podcast. But you know, these guys, we all sort of get into the studio and we just work, and we all make tracks and we all make songs, and some things don't ever make it out. They just sit in the bank, you know, like whatever makes it out makes it out. Whatever stays in stays in. So there are so many that are building up. It's just a matter of time until they actually make it out now.
Yeah, but that's sick. I mean, it seems like you have a good working atmosphere at the studio you're working at. You know, people, you know, young MCs, groups, whoever they are, coming through and just working on music. And as you said, if it gets put out, sick. If it doesn't, so be it. But you know, I think it's important. And it's something that I've heard, and again, I don't know how true it is. I've heard from a few different people, to be fair, that in Australia, there's, you know, hip hop still, although it's been about for years, it's not been celebrated in a mainstream light until very, very recently. And so because of that, there's not as many facilities and things going on to support like young people doing rap. So for example, there's not many like hip hop rap open mics. Like there might be open mics for like acoustic singers or, you know, guitarists or whatever, but like for things like rap, things like cheap studio time, like there are places here and there, but there's not an abundance of places like this. Are you able to touch on that, like in terms of is that something that is true from your perspective? Is there a lot of things for young people to get into rap, or is it something that needs to be worked on over the next few years? I think
slowly, you know, over the last, look, in, like you said, in the early day, like 10, you know, if we're going to speak about in its earliest sort of in its you know, very, very premature stage, you know, it's been around, but in a commercial sense, no. Only I'd say as of late, maybe the last 2 or 3 years, maybe like three at the most. We've started to notice a lot more activity, started to notice a lot more artists starting to pop out. But as far as like you know, development centers or anything like that, not at all. You don't. Really the only ones that can do it are the ones with the means to actually have studio time, or with the means to buy beats and then record in their own, you know, in their own way or wherever they're recording. But you know, as far as any community development or government development, anything like that, it's non-existent. So and I think there's still a bit of time until we get there. I'd say. I mean, the scene in general is still very, very, it's developing. Like, we're definitely not anywhere near, you know, where we want to be. I'd say within the next 10 years, we'll probably start to see some real, like, serious money in the scene, but not right now. I mean, there are maybe one or two artists, you know, I mean, we all know who they are that have really hit some really decent numbers. But apart from that, man, it's going to be a while until we see, you know, consistently, we're going to see people, you know, having access to the sort of main realm of things, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something and I'm gonna stick it away in the archive somewhere. All right.
Go for it.
In the UK, we have an abundance of things like that now. Like in London, especially where I'm at. Like obviously outside of London, when you're in towns and countryside, not necessarily so much. But in London, there is almost too many of these kind of interventions and workshops going on.
Right.
The amount of things, like if I was to type in North London rap studio time, or just let's say North London studio, there is probably 15 to 20 different places that I can go and work out within a 3 to 5 mile radius around where I live. Yeah, there is just an abundance of things. I used to record at a place called the Roundhouse, which is only available for 13 to 25 year olds. So it's basically aimed at young people.
Yeah.
And majority of their stuff is free or like really cheap. Like you can book like studio time for like £1 an hour.
Wow.
But it doesn't come with an engineer, but like you've got all of the facilities there. Yeah. Like you can just go in, boom, and do your thing there. And I used it for a couple of years, and you know there's a bunch of things like that, and that all stemmed 10 to 15 years ago when UK music was just starting to get celebrated, when rap was being made commercially. It wasn't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily hear like hood music, what we would consider hip hop now to be in the mainstream. Like, you know, you could rap in music, but it was very much aimed for radio, for TV, for the charts, etc., etc. So, But because of that, we had an influx of things that some were government funded to help young people get into music. And the whole idea behind it was get young people off of the streets, get them out of just doing an absolute madness and get them into doing something positive. And then over the last few years, the government have actually gone back on it, and they're actually now cutting these things more and more. They're taking these things away. So the things that are originally funded by them, they're like, we need this money for something else. But then they continue to blame the youth about like, but there's too many young people getting into the wrong things and not doing the right thing. But it's like you're restricting the outlet for some of them. And it's not just rap, you know, whether it be drama, whether it, you know, whatever field you want to get into. So one thing that will be interesting to see, and this is why I say I'm going to put this in the archive, as times go forward, I want to see how much the government has a part to play in young people's lives when we talk about hip hop in particular. All right. I want to see how much they are willing to invest into things such as free studio time for young people, or we want to build companies and workshops to send into schools to then try and do, you know, things with people in schools and things like that. What do you think would be, and of course this is a bit of a hot take, but like what things do you think would help certain people? Because obviously we know, you know, some people grow up and they just feel like they have nothing, right? You know what I mean? And for there's going to be so many with the likes of the 1-4s, the HP boys, all of these groups coming through, and especially for a certain demographic, you know. There's going to be a lot of influence. So what things do you potentially think could be put out there to help young people?
I think there are to say that you know, they're non-existent in Australia, I think it's a bit of an extreme statement. There might be one or two, but if there's more of, because you're right, I think it remains like as a vicious, like for the certain demographic, it becomes a vicious cycle where they just think it's, you know, there's only one way out for them, or one or two things to do for them, and you know, I think if there's a little bit more, not so much education, but I think if these industry, if we're going to talk rap industry, like Oz rap industry leaders or thought speakers or thinkers maybe come forward, I think if there's more of them that come forward and show that there's actually potential to do something in this country, I think a lot of people will switch on and say, you know, rather than doing what we're doing out here on the street, maybe we can do this, you know. And I think you know, if we're going to talk about demographic, I think, you know, everybody within that demographic, you know, all the young sort of 12 to 20-year-olds, I think they would love the idea of being a rapper, you know. I think that you know, if it's not that, then probably sport or something. But you know, nowadays, or you know, in the last year or so, that we're seeing a lot of these rappers, you know, sort of come to the forefront, to stardom per se. It's starting to become, you know, it's in reach, it's achievable, and I think that you know, if we can show them that it's achievable, you know, more of them will do it. And I think it might change the mentality and shift the paradigm of these kids. It'll just, you know, they'll start to look at life a little bit differently. Maybe we can make money this way, or maybe we can do this. And, you know, so I think it's just a bit more education, a little bit more. So I think, you know, the 1-4 crew, they have, I don't know if you've ever seen Howie. I think he's the manager.
Yeah, Howie. Yeah,
so he's like totally in tune with the kids, and he's totally in tune with the community, and he's like doing all sorts of talks and stuff. And you know, he's really, I think he's really trying. He's really, you know, that's the sort of thing we need more of that. You know, so you know, I don't know if that's going to be the answer, but I think that's definitely going to make the difference. So
yeah, that's it. Because I mean, you know, we here in London just seems to be the hub for creatives in the UK scene, just across, you know, the entire spectrum. From musicians to actors and actresses, you know. And so many artists and creatives of the last 10 to 15 years talk about when they were growing up, it's because, you know, I know such and such and so because we all used to go to this after school thing here, or we used to meet at this youth center place here. And, you know, there's so many people that do their thing, they go off in their own branches of life, and then all of a sudden different people reach different levels of success, and then still like, well, I actually 10 years ago was doing the same thing as so-and-so, and they're like both big names in their own right, you know? And so, you know, just to be clear, things like that don't necessarily, all of a sudden, if you open up one youth center that's focused, and allows people to do rap and dance and acting, etc., etc., it doesn't mean that all of a sudden, that whole area is going to be fine now. Like, no, definitely not. But things like that can help at least plant that seed in their head of, there is something else out there.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Especially if they can take an interest in that. And so I feel like if people can start, I don't know how it works. I'll be honest. I'm just spitballing the idea out here right now. But how possible is it to get something like that working? How realistic is it to make sure that it's it can be maintained? Basically, you're not gonna like open something that's gonna flop in like 2 months. Something that can be maintained. And how can we do this at scale? To help people, because with as much as the influence of rappers and like, oh my god, I want to be just like so and so, as much as that's great, it can also bring like negative influences, some people may say, so it's about finding that balance. If you're going to be influenced by this industry, it can be a dangerous industry to be influenced
Absolutely.
by.
It's a double-edged sword.
Plenty of stories, of course, and you hear plenty of stories of rappers themselves saying, I grew up listening to such and such, and because of it I also started doing, like, I started sipping lean, or I started smoking weed, etc., etc. And we've heard these stories time and time again across all walks of life. And so I feel like it's sick that so many young people in particular are going to be inspired by this current generation of Aussie rappers. But I feel like it would be even better if we could also get that kind of support with it,
Absolutely.
Be able to, as much as you are inspired by that, that's sick. Now this is how you can do it, and help young people like walk them through. This is how it works. This is what goes into making a song. It's not just recording it off of your phone and just putting it out there. This is how to mix and master. This is how to DJ.
Absolutely.
This is how to produce. I think things like that would be so sick to see if whoever the powers may be out there can get that working, man. I think that would be such a sick thing.
Just while we're on that, it's actually interesting because I'm going to talk about the other side of it now, though, because at the moment, obviously, we're seeing like a real serious uprising in Australian drill. So there's a lot of people coming out now, and they're doing drill, and they're talking about these things, and whether they're true or not, they're sending a message, right? So they're sending the message of, this is what we're doing, and this is how we do it, and if this can be very appealing to kids. You know what I'm saying? So.
Course.
Very, very appealing. If you see the numbers that they're achieving on YouTube, like, it's getting big views, and they say, these guys are popular, maybe we should do this as well. We got to start drilling, we got to start going out doing this, doing that. And it's like, well, I don't know if that's a good idea, man. Like, these guys are looking good on camera, but in the background, what's happening, so it's definitely something.
Of course. And I'll just say this. That lifestyle is more appealing to talk about than it is to live.
100%.
Like, I've not run around with a belly on doing a madness. I've not. But I have seen things happen, and I've seen things happen to people around me. And all I will say is that it's so easy to be loud on social media, but the minute that camera's not there, or when that camera's on you from somebody else, it's very interesting, or it's very sad to see how quickly that person then becomes quiet. It seems very enticing because your favorite rapper is on the camera, and they're wearing the chain, and they're wearing the tracksuit, and they're wearing the pair of TNs that you've always wanted. But with that, all I'll say is this, because I can get into a very long speech about the influence of hip hop, but I'm not downplaying it. I grew up with hip hop in my life. I grew up with, Kanye West talking his business. I grew up with Eminem talking his business. Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, all of them people telling their own stories in their own rights from different walks of life. I don't see myself, following what they went through in the negative light. But I will say this: when rappers, whether they're doing drill or whether they're doing hip hop, boom bap, trap, grime, whatever it is, just know that they're telling their story. They're not encouraging you to go and do that yourself. They are just telling the story that they went through.
Yeah.
For some people, they're telling their story so that you don't have to. Or sometimes we all want to kind of live out that fantasy. How many people pick up a copy of GTA and start running people over on the pavement? It doesn't mean you're going to go do that in real life, but sometimes we just need to get that kick out of us. Yeah?
Absolutely.
It happens. Yeah, not everyone gets to play as a middle-aged, deranged psycho who wakes up naked in the middle of the Chilean mountains, yeah, and go run them over in a Jeep. Not everyone gets to do that, but we look to
so
video games as that
right?
outlet. Yeah, but it's true, right? And so for some of us, when we feel away, we can listen to rap, and that's our outlet to get that out of us. It's not necessary. I'm not gonna run around shooting people, but sometimes when I hear that lyric, when I hear that 50 Cent lyric, wow, I feel away for 10 seconds.
Absolutely, man.
That is our outlet. So use that music as an outlet. Use it as a way to express that anger or how you feel. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to go and do that yourself. Yeah, and so I know it's such a preachy message of, oh, do right in your life, don't do bad. Like, fucking, you know, it's near impossible to just say that and it be final. But yeah, just use it as an outlet and use it as something to look at as a story more so than an influence that you need to do yourself.
100%. Man, that was like with the first time I heard 1-4, that's exactly how I felt like I wanted to go and run through a brick wall. But then the song finished. And then I remembered who I was. I had to go walk into a house. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's just for that moment.
That's like I'm sure Rops gets them as well. Do you ever see the comments where it's just like, this song makes me want to rob myself? This makes me want to rob my own house or something. Yeah. And I think music's sick for that. I think it's sick to have that feeling. Like, I do it. I'd be a hypocrite to say that certain music doesn't make me feel away, as if I haven't listened to 1-4 and Hooligan Hefs, who I've known to be beefing each other, and I haven't jumped up for both of them saying that they're gonna shoot someone or stab someone or stomp someone's head into the curb. As if I haven't on camera on my channel that you're watching right now jumped up and got excited over that. I'd be a liar to say if I didn't.
Yeah.
But I know the difference between someone telling their story and that making me feel away versus me going and doing certain things myself.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like, I just believe there has to be a line that you draw at the end of the day, and you know, certain people get it twisted. They think that you have to all of a sudden be from the hood, or you have to be a gangster to all of a sudden enjoy music. Like, no, it's not the case. Since when? But I'm going to be very selfish for 30 seconds very quickly.
Yeah.
Somebody commented on my video yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, when they were like, Chazza, just want to say I know your life story. I know that you graduated from university with a degree and you're not from a rough area. And I just stopped reading the comment there. Big man, since when was that my life story? I never graduated university and I'm looking outside. It doesn't look too safe right now. So that's where I'm just going to leave that. I had to be selfish there for 30 seconds. But moving on. Man. So I think.
Let me ask you something now. I want to ask you something. I want to know.
Go for it.
Because we always talk about this all the time. Between myself and my cousin and Malik, we always talk about where do we think Oz rap is going? Where do we think is this drill movement sustainable? Do you think it's going to move right into the next 10 years, or do you think it's just a phase? Like, do we think? And a little bit of a tangent at the moment, but that's why I'm so like heavily involved and a follower of Rops, because he's not one. He doesn't do one thing. Doesn't do one sound. You know, he can do drill. He can do trap. He can do rap. He can do like, you know, real talk stuff. You know, it's he's a all in all rapper. Like he's a round rapper. You know what I mean? So
he's versatile.
Versatile, absolutely. So this is a question that I wanted to ask you. Where do you think, like, is drill something that's going to be? Do you think is drill going to last, or do you think it's just going to be out, or like over the next 12 months, 18 months?
I think it's going to last if the sound continues to develop. If the sound doesn't develop and it kind of, let's just say, it pauses or even reverts back to sounding more like the UK, I think it will die out quite quickly. I think if it continues to take the path that it currently is, where it's starting to really branch away from the UK now, I think that it's going to be sustainable, and I say it's going to be sustainable for a long time. That we've got this weird thing right now where I'm going to take HP Boys as an example. They put out a song and people are still labeling it as Aus Drill.
That's not drill.
And I'm like, but it's not drill, in my opinion. Drill. But they're going, but it's Australians' version of drill. And I'm like, nah. Notice how I'll say these Oz rap groups. I just call them a rap group because I don't know what it is. Some call it poly rap, some call it tropical drill, but it's not drill. Like, people are associating a group of rappers to be drill. No, drill is a sound. It's not by how many people are in the group. If we're defining it by that, then they're known as a boy band. They're not a boy band either.
Right, yeah.
So, you know, I feel like whatever this genre is, you know, what we're hearing from like Enemy, 30 Kings, who are now departed, but 30 Kings, HP Boys, you know, all of these different groups that are coming out from different areas of Australia, which, by the way, is so sick to see. Like, people just coming out representing their area. I think that's so sick. But whatever that is, I hope that continues to develop, and I hope it gets a name. I hope it catches on, and I hope it can then brand itself as its own thing and not just be known as drill. Because I think with the term drill, people are still associating it with the UK, perhaps even the US, but it's definitely near the UK drill.
Yeah, definitely.
So I hope that whatever these boys are doing, I hope that they can kind of just define their own genre in their own way. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what people want to call it, but I think once that starts to define itself, I say then it really separates into its own lane. Right now, that lane is kind of, it's forking off, but they need to take that turn and go into their own lane completely. Then I say it will be sustainable, and I say that there will be a lot of influence coming with that, and this is the transition period. I'll say 2019, 2020, maybe even 2021, it will be the transition phase, but I say within the next couple of years, I hope it branches into its own thing.
That's the question I've been asking myself, though, because it's drill. How different can it be, or how many different ways can it be interpreted? How many different ways can it be sort of designed? Because the first time I heard UK drill, I was like, all right, dope, because it was the first time I heard it. I was like, this is sick. But then I heard another guy, and then I heard another guy, and then I heard another guy, and they all sounded the same. And I was like, well, okay, maybe this is one sound, and that's just what people do there. And it started to become very monotone, and it was just like it became very boring. Like, but then you know, and I sort of zoned out. But then Dutchavelli came round, and I was like, wow, this guy's like. I was like, well, if this guy can do it the way he's doing it, maybe it's not so boring after all. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. So,
sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if our guys here can do it in a way where it doesn't become monotone or repetitive or boring, I think we'll be able to do something. But at the moment, it's starting to become the same old, you know, repetitive lines and you know, same old, you know, lingo. It's just not fresh anymore, you know?
And I think that's where we're having to shake off the UK drill connotations, because as much as people say it's completely its own thing, as a genre, as a scene, it's definitely not. Yeah. Like, I know it's easy to define things as like I always say the Oz scene, like the Australian scene, but within that you've got your own little cliques. Like, there is a grime scene, there is a drill scene, there is a boom bap scene, you know, there's people's own lanes that you can go into. And I feel like even like the ones that I do say have their own cliques, I wouldn't say they're their own scene yet. I still agree with your statement from earlier, where the Australian rap as a whole is still young. Yeah. I know it started in the 80s and early 90s. I know that there's been people about for decades now, but it's still in an early stage. Yeah. Like, when you think of hip hop as a genre worldwide, it's still a young genre compared to most. If you had a whole list of genres and you put them all in a list of when they were created, hip hop is still in that early bracket. It's still a recent thing. Yeah. And when you look at the subgenres of rap or hip hop, when you look at things like grime and you look at things like drill, they're still very young. UK drill only really was popularized, I'm not going to say the exact time and who started it, but it only popularized like 2016, 2017. Yeah. So it's no older than 5 years tops. Yeah. Like, in terms of how, and since it's been seen in their mainstream limelight. I'm sure somebody in Australia was making a drill track 5 years ago. Yeah. But in terms of who popularized it, it only started becoming late 2018, early 2019 is when it started to just take a rise. And so I think that, I agree. I think certain drill can get repetitive, and it's why I don't listen to too much of it. There's only a few drill acts that I can listen to, because it gets boring for me personally as well, in terms of it sounds repetitive. And but I know people that just absolutely live for it. Like, grime may be seen as repetitive for some people, but to me, I love it. I could listen to it all day, and it's just what I personally enjoy. So I don't know how long drill will last. I say that its best chance is if it does branch into its own thing, and when it does, I don't think it will be labeled as drill, because
it might have
stylistically it's nearer to old school hip hop than it is like I see a comment on Inner West Young'uns or 21 Young'uns. They were like, oh yeah, this is Aus Drill, and I'm like, this is like 90s hip hop R&B. This is nowhere near drill. R&B and drill.
You got to remember though, because
things,
so majority of the people that are typing in these comments, they're like probably under 15, maybe, you know, or 14, 15,
or
16
just people
year olds
who are just not educated on music. I don't know how, like, obviously I know culture brings difference, but here in London, especially because we've got such a multicultural, you know, diverse landscape here in London, we've just grown up with everything, just absolutely. And even UK rap is influenced by so many different cultures. Like J Hus, massive name from the UK, but has such an African influence in his music, and people forget that this is nearer an African sound than it is a British sound.
Totally.
But us as Brits celebrate that, you know. And so people forget how much influence we have with Australia. You know, I know that there's a massive like drum and bass and like kind of just electronic culture in Australia. Am I right in saying
huge
that?
festival culture. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, see, it's big here, but nowhere near as big as rap is. Like, rap is now the mainstream thing that majority of people listen to. You know, I've been to parties where I'm the only white person there, and people are looking at me like, "Who are you?" But I fit in perfectly fine. And then I've been to other parties where, you know, everyone's dressed up in suits, and I feel out of place. I'm like, even I feel like too hood to be here. Like, what's this about? Like, you know, but regardless, whether being at either end of the demographic, it's, you hear rap music. Like, that is become the new thing now. It's become the mainstream thing here. Rap music reaches #1 on the charts here in the UK.
I'd like to see it just as rap music, and then that's the umbrella, and then whatever happens underneath it is whatever. But I just want it to be labeled as rap music, and these artists to be just rappers. I don't want them to feel like they have to stick to drill or whatever it is that they're doing, right? So just it's however you interpret the instrumental, you know, like you could have, you know, 5 or 6 different styles of instrumentals, and you know, if the rapper's hard, he can do all 5, you know what I mean? And it's not necessarily just because he's a drill rapper he's not allowed to do those 5 instrumentals, you know what I'm saying? So I think just if they just stick to just having it as rap, it just leaves it open, you know?
Yeah, no, of course, I agree. And I mean, I celebrate, you know, all walks of rap, you know, and people forget that. Whether you're doing drill or grime or boom bap or any of these subgenres, you are still rapping. Yeah. Like, it's still technically hip hop, whether you see it as traditional hip hop or not, you know, that's up to your own interpretation, you know. But the sound has progressed over the years. You know, recently I've been looking into a lot of older Australian hip hop, and yesterday I made a video on Trem. Yeah. And that was just an absolute blast to go through his older stuff, and you know, and then it just reminds you of this, what I may react to last week from a new artist, that stemmed from what people like Trem were doing, and that stemmed from America when they were doing things like this. So, you know, the sound is going to progress, and evolve. There is a new subgenre of music that we don't know about that's going to spring up in 10, 15, 20 years time, and it's going to become the new trend, and it's going to become the new wave, and we're just not aware of it yet. And so when you mentioned earlier in terms of like how different can it be, it's going to be different. It's just in ways that we've not realized it yet. Like, as much as we think everything's been done, it's nowhere near done. Something new and crazy is going to come out, and as we get older, we're going to start to be like, this was real music back in the day, and then realize you grew up in Gangnam Style was #1 in the charts. Just pipe down for a moment. But
what a time to be alive when Gangnam.
What a time to be alive. What was that? So what does the fuck say? That reached like what, #1, #2, like Baby Shark. That did numbers. It's like,
oh man, that's annoying.
There's only so much we can talk about real music, people. Just, it is what it is. Just have a good time. That's right. Celebrate new music that comes out, but don't be labeled to one. I agree with you. Make what you want to make. I know there's a negative connotation behind artists being known for one subgenre, and then they make one drill track, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, they're selling out because they want to do drill. And it's like, I understand drill's the wave, but they are allowed to do it if they want. Like, Same way drill artists can do rap.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with that, you know?
See, Drake's been on a bit of a drill wave at the moment, or recently, and it's like, oh, well, Drake's a drill rapper now. Well, no, not really. I mean, he's just rapping over drill beats, you know? So
yeah, I was more annoyed with the accent thing.
Yeah, he really turned that on, didn't he?
Yeah, like, just Drake, just spit in your Canadian American accent. That's fine. You don't need to do the one from them man. Like, he tried to do the British Jamaican thing, and people got to realize that as well. English slang is heavily influenced by the Caribbean. And a lot of art, like, you know, like, for example, English people would say like, oh, that's a mad ting instead of mad thing. But ting it stems from a Jamaican Caribbean culture, you know? And so people always, I see the comment in my videos from time to time as well. They're just like, stop thinking you're Jamaican. Like, I've got my whole story within that in itself. But yeah, you know, British and UK street culture, whether that be slang, the way we dress, everything like that, is massively influenced by the Caribbean, and it has an African influence as well, because we have so many different cultures from Africa over here as well, and that's mainly in London. But London, as I said before, is the hub for 90% of the creatives in England, in the UK. So, you know, it makes sense why it has such an effect there. But I mean, I still hear the debate of, like, I will say a certain rapper or a certain artist is using UK slang, and they'll be like, no, we've been using that in Australia for years. And then there's the debate of, where does this stem from, you know? But oftentimes we're arguing over something that isn't Australian, it isn't British, it actually stemmed from somewhere else that we have adopted, you know? That's something. Do you feel like Aussie rappers are getting more comfortable in using Australian slang in their music?
Absolutely, man. I think like when it's like the time when you started to see a lot more UK music or UK rap, you know, hit the commercial level or hit a commercial space, and it was becoming cool to have, you know, a UK feature or whatever it was. I think a time will come where the Australian accent will sound cool, and I think it will be cool to have an Australian feature. I don't know if all eyes are on Australia. I mean, I mean, definitely not right now, but I think there will be a point in time where I think all eyes will be on Australia. And you know, these bigger artists will look around and say, you know, well, you know, he's pretty hard, or she's doing well. You know, we've got to go tap into that. I think there will be a time. I think it's like the extreme levels of the Australian accent. Like, you can have real, like, Australian, like, really I don't even know how to explain it, but there's like, if you heard them speak, you'd say like, yeah, they're Aussie. Like, fuck Earth, they're Aussie. You know what I mean? Like, but then you can have like a real, like, sort of more tidier, cleaner Australian accent, and you're like, okay, they're Australian, but they're doing it in a real tidy way, you know? And I think anything in between is obviously comes down to the person. But I don't know, man. Like, there are so many artists out there that sound really Aussie, but they sound dope when they're doing it. And then there are other artists that sound Australian, but like a little cleaner and sort of polished and refined. And then they're also dope the way they do it as well. So, I mean, it just comes down to the individual.
I just say spit in your natural accent.
Yeah.
Like, just whatever you naturally sound like, just do it. And obviously that's difficult because Australians have obviously grown up listening to a lot of American hip-hop, and now the newer generation listening to a lot of English rap and drill and grime, etc., etc. So I can understand. When I first started rapping, I sounded slightly American.
Yeah.
For the first like 4 or 5 tracks I put out, I did sound American, and I didn't think that other people would point that out.
Yeah.
And then one day, and it was the first grime track that I made. So the first like few tracks I ever made were like rap tracks, and then the first grime track I did, people were like, "Oh, you sound British now." I was like, oh, really? And then I kind of realized, you know, but that's the same here. Some people overemphasize their British accent, and some people stylistically have like made their career because of it. You know, they kind of play into that. They lean into it a bit more. Other people then put on the Caribbean twist or the African twist, and it's like, you're definitely not that. And to be fair, that's something I need to stop myself from doing. From listening to artists like Burna Boy and J Hus, and certain times I'll find myself putting on that twist, and it's like, no, but that's not your accent.
Not
this
you.
is how you talk. Chazza, this is how you talk, so this is how you're gonna rap. I have to stop myself.
You sound exactly the way you rap sounds exactly how you talk, man.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and that's what I aim to do.
Yeah.
But I think that comes with not overthinking it, but at least being conscious, or just listening back with an open ear, to, you know, how you sound. But with all eyes being on Australia, I think when 1-4 blown up, and then
Yeah.
that whole moment happened. I think for just a moment.
Just a moment, yeah.
Eyes were on Australia.
Absolutely.
Because it was reaching mainstream social media content here.
Yeah.
Like all of the biggest meme pages and everything were posting like, Australians are doing drill.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Australians are doing drill. And so it reached our social media pages for a day or two. And for me, someone like me, it was so sick to see because everyone on my timeline was like Australia. And whether it was being a meme, like, you get stamped down at the barbecue, like, and it was like some people were making a meme, but even then I was laughing to myself because people are at least going, but at least in Australia there's a group. And so I remember shortly after that, people would come up to me and be like, you react to Australian like music, don't you? And I'd be like, yeah, that's 1-4. And they'd be like, what? And they'd ask me, and then it would be like, yes, this is so sick because people are now at least planting the seed. And so now, right now, if I go on my social media, I won't see anything about, from my UK people that I follow, won't be anything about Australia rap or drill.
Yeah.
But there'll be a time where it pops back up again and people go, I remember that 1-4 group and and there's only so many times you can go through that before people start going on the route of self-discovery and they want to start checking it out themselves.
Exactly right.
And so
I think the difference will be like, say for example, they have 1-4 has the feature with Ferg, ASAP Ferg.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big deal, and I think that it's going to be things like that. It's going to be features like that that are going to make the difference, and people's ears will start perking up and saying, well, what's happening in Australia? Why are these artists going to Australia? What are they doing down there? So like I said, there might be a point in time, not now, maybe 5 years, 10 years. I think all eyes may be. I don't know if it's going to be all eyes, but I'm going to say majority of eyes will be here because they might be looking for new talent. I genuinely believe like. If Chillin' continues to do what he's doing, and then Husky, if he ends up, really, really excelling and coming out with an album and he kills it and blah, 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 I think there's going to be some real serious eyes looking at these artists. You know what I mean? So, I think, like you said, man, we're very young, but there's so much potential. It's a refreshing sound. It's a refreshing accent. And there's a lot of real forward thinking individuals here as well. I don't know, I don't know if you've sort of dug deep into too much research, but there are some real creative individuals here, and we've got, when I was making house music like 10 years ago, we would get our inspiration from the French and from the UK, and then they would get some from us. But then when America tried to get involved, like in the house scene, they'd come to Australia to get their inspiration. And it was like, because they know that we're doing something different. So I think it'll be the same thing with Australian rap, in the coming years, that there's going to be something that people are going to start to look at and say, we need to look at them, or we need to start doing what they're doing. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear to see that nowadays, in this current generation of Aussie artists, they're definitely more influenced by the UK than they are America.
Yeah.
Like, before it was America, I'd say right now I'm comfortable in saying that more influenced by the UK. Here's my advice to any creative in Australia right now. Your craft should be made to celebrate your culture. It should be using Aussie slang. You should be doing it in an Aussie accent. You should be doing things that are, to the core, still Australian. All right? Do not pander to America. Do not pander to the UK. Do what Australians like the most. Do what you want to do, because there'll be the day, as you said, when all eyes are on you, and it's better to have people come to you because what you are doing is sick, rather than, oh, look what I'm doing UK, look what I'm doing America, look at me because look what I can do, look, you're used to this sound. They're not going to want that, because when these UK artists, when these American artists want to work with Aussies, it's because they're doing something that their scene doesn't have, or it's because something that someone in their scene can't bring to the table. They're going to want to bring something that's so originally unique to them that's where the collaboration works. Ferg has hit up 1-4, not because 1-4 were pandering to US rap or drill or anything like that, because 1-4 were doing their own thing, and that's where the connection's made. Given there might be an element of playing the game of, they're popping, they're doing numbers, so of course, there's always going to be an element of that.
But Ferg can also say, look, I don't want to touch them because I think they're whack, but they're not whack. You know what I mean? So like, what they're doing is really dope.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
There you go. And so, I think that for anyone who is doing music in particular, just make what Aussies like most, because the minute you start pandering to another scene, I don't think it's going to work. And I have an example in my head, and I'm not going to talk about it now, but let's just put it like this. There are artists that start making a name in Australia, and they go off to the UK or they go off to America. And that's fine. They can try and make it in that scene because it's a larger scene. You know, there's more money to be made, more opportunities, should you say. But if that doesn't go well,
you can't revert back to what you were
your
doing.
Core fan base back in Australia.
Yeah.
There's other artists that do a very similar style of music, but they've made a massive buzz in Australia, and I think long term it's going to work out better for them. But 100%. I could be wrong. That's just my 2 cents.
And I was actually going to bring up that example with, I was actually going to say that, but I thought I might not. Yeah.
No worries, man. But I'm going to wrap it up here. Is there any last things that you want to touch on? Any last things?
Not really, man. Not really. No. Just, I mean, I really appreciate what you're doing for the culture, bro. Like, I
appreciate it, man.
I really, there was nothing really happening like this. It's given so many artists a platform. It's given people to have a look and discuss and sort of break down and have like critical thinking sessions about artists and their art and music and all that sorts of stuff. I think it's good. It's open dialogue. It gives people a chance and opportunity to talk about their art. For other people to critique it as well. The more involvement we have in this sort of like in an exercise like the way you're doing right now, it's just going to expose the culture even more. So that's we just need to keep going with it.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. Appreciate the kind words. But any last things that you want to plug? Any last things that you want to shout out?
Just shout out to all the usuals, man. Like Malik One Lane, Rops, Dills. Let's keep going, man. Like if we can get album 2 out this year, let's do it.